You know, I used to believe that the worst kind of pain came from things like death, or losing your job, or getting sick, but betrayal, that's a different kind of wound. It doesn't just hurt you, it shakes your trust in people, your instincts, even your own memory of events. Like, how could I not have seen it coming? But let me start from the beginning. Back in 2022, I had just moved to Austin, Texas. I'd left behind a 4-year relationship that had slowly eroded into nothing but passive-aggressive silence and late-night arguments about dishes and missed calls. I was 31, freshly single, and trying to rebuild a life that felt like it had been paused for years. I got a new apartment, a decent job at a non-profit downtown, and for the first time in a long while, I was trying to figure out what I liked, not what we liked. I was on Bumble. Yeah, I know. Classic post-breakup move. Swipe right for validation, left for sanity. And that's where I met him. His name was Chris Devlin. I still remember his profile bio. Simple, confident, charming in that effortless way. Whiskey lover, amateur chef, dad joke enthusiast. Let's get tacos. He had kind eyes. Not just handsome, though he definitely was, but warm, familiar, somehow. His pictures were mostly just him hiking, laughing, one with a golden retriever puppy. He told me later that wasn't even his dog, just one he borrowed from a friend for photos. That should have been a red flag, right? But back then, it just made me laugh. We started talking, and it just clicked. He was attentive, responsive. He didn't play games. On our first date, he picked a cozy little bar near the Riverwalk, and he brought me flowers. Not roses, sunflowers. My favorite. I hadn't told him that, but somehow he guessed. You just seem like a sunflower kind of girl, he said with this sheepish grin. I melted. Chris told me he was separated. Not divorced, separated. He said it casually, like it wasn't a big deal. We've been done for a while. It's just paperwork now, he explained. We're just tying up some legal stuff. I asked all the questions you'd expect. Were there kids? No. Why did it end? We just grew apart. Did she know he was dating again? She's moved on too. And you know what? I believed him. I really did. He never hid me. He didn't act sketchy or disappear for days. We texted throughout the day. He called me babe. He met my friends. He cooked me dinner and massaged my feet after work. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. He even left a toothbrush at my place by week 3. He said he wanted me to know he was serious. I told my best friend Casey everything. She wasn't fully sold. I mean, separated is still married. She warned me. Just be careful. But I was already in too deep. I didn't want to be careful. I wanted to fall. 3 months in, Chris asked me if I'd ever consider moving in together. Not right away, but eventually. It felt fast, but honestly, so did my heartbeat whenever I saw his name pop up on my phone. I was already planning imaginary futures, weekend trips, IKEA shopping, maybe even a dog together. The sunflower kind of dream. There were a few odd things though, looking back. He never let me come to his house. Always some excuse. It's being remodeled, or the lease is about to expire, or my ex still has some stuff there. It's complicated. He was always at my apartment. He never spent the night 2 nights in a row, and he'd take some calls in the bathroom. Door closed, water running. But I justified all of it. We do that, don't we? When we want something to be real, we explain away all the things that don't add up. I told myself he was being considerate, that he was just a private person, that maybe I was being too suspicious because of my last relationship. I didn't want to poison something good with my past trauma, and so I ignored my gut. Then came the message. It was a random Tuesday morning, in late September, September 27th, to be exact. I was sipping lukewarm coffee and waiting for a Zoom meeting to start when my phone buzzed. A message request on Instagram from someone named Alyssa Devlin. I almost didn't open it. I thought it was a bot or spam, but something about the name made my stomach tighten. Her message was simple. Hi. I'm Chris's wife. Not ex, just wife. I think we need to talk. I stared at the screen for what felt like a lifetime. Wife, not ex, wife. I didn't know what to think. I read it again and again. My fingers went cold. I checked the profile. It was real. Her pictures were normal. Brunch with friends, hiking, selfies with a golden retriever that looked suspiciously like the one from Chris's profile. She had their wedding photo pinned at the top of her grid. A wedding photo. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. My hands were shaking. My brain felt like it had been unplugged from reality. The meeting started, and I just sat there staring at the screen, nodding along, trying to breathe. Later that night, I messaged her back, and that's when everything began to unravel. You think you know someone. You think you're safe. But sometimes you're just the next name on a long list of lies. And what came next? Well, I can't say I'm proud of it. But I'm also not sorry. Because some men learn best when the women they underestimate decide to work together. And me and Alyssa, we were about to give Chris a taste of his own medicine. Only ours came with a soundtrack. Mambo No 5. I met Alyssa Devlin for the first time over video chat 2 nights after her message. We had exchanged a few texts by then, polite, cautious, both of us dancing around the obvious heartbreak we were trying to digest. It felt surreal, messaging the wife of the man I thought was mine. She wasn't hostile. She didn't accuse or scream. She just wanted answers, like I did. We agreed to talk on Zoom. I lit a candle before the call. No idea why. Maybe I thought it would ground me. Or maybe I just needed something warm and flickering in a night that felt so brutally cold. When she came on screen, my breath caught. She was beautiful. Not Instagram filter beautiful. Real beautiful. Shoulder-length curly hair, sharp cheekbones, brown eyes with dark circles that told me she hadn't slept well either. She looked tired, broken, even, but strong. You could feel the steel underneath the pain. She stared at me for a moment, probably sizing me up. I wondered how many girlfriends Chris had introduced to her like this, digitally, unintentionally, unwillingly. I hated that I was probably not the first. I'm not here to fight, she said gently. Neither am I. And just like that, the wall cracked. We spent almost 3 hours talking that night, sharing details, cross-referencing dates, text screenshots, photos, voice memos. Turns out Chris had never filed for divorce, not even close. They were still very much legally married, sharing a house in a quiet suburb called Brushy Creek, a short drive north of Austin. He wasn't staying there sometimes to get his stuff, like he told me. He lived there, slept there, paid bills there. There was no separation. He would tell Alyssa he had business trips, or late work dinners. He even fabricated an out-of-town project once that he claimed would last 2 weeks. That was the time he practically moved into my place and brought over a duffel bag with his clothes and a damn NutriBullet. I remember holding back tears while listening to Alyssa describe how he'd sit on their couch and complain about how hard dating is now. The audacity. He would criticize Tinder, mock Bumble bios, while actively dating women like me. It wasn't just me. I wasn't special. I was just next. Apparently I was the 4th serious girlfriend she had found since 2020. One had shown up at their front door. Another had texted her thinking she was the other woman. One girl, Alyssa said, actually thought Chris was widowed. Widowed. I didn't want to believe it was happening again. Alyssa whispered during the call, but when I saw how he looked in your photos, that same fake little half smile, I just knew. I don't know what hurt more, realizing I'd been conned, or watching the woman he legally promised to love fall apart while trying to warn me. My heartbreak melted into something sharper, angrier. I went through every memory in my mind like a forensic investigator. All the conversations, the disappearances, the fake explanations, all of it suddenly bathed in a harsh fluorescent light. The romantic dinners, she'd cooked them. The scented lotion on his skin, hers. The hoodie he forgot at my place. had her name stitched in the label, AD. I cried for a while that night after we hung up. Not the pretty movie cry, either. The ugly full-body kind where your stomach cramps and your face feels raw. I didn't even make it to the bed. Just collapsed on the living room floor, clutching a throw pillow like a lifeline. I was angry at him, of course. But I was angrier at myself. How could I fall for it? Again. But by the next morning, something in me shifted. I didn't want to just walk away. Not this time. I wanted him to feel it. I didn't want revenge just for me. I wanted it for Alyssa, for the other women, for every time we doubted ourselves, swallowed our instincts, or cried into the silence he left behind. And the idea hit me during my lunch break, as I was scrolling Spotify to drown out my thoughts. Mambo number 5. It came on shuffle. That stupid, infectious, annoyingly catchy 90s song. I almost skipped it, until the lyrics hit. A little bit of Monica in my life at a little bit of Erica by my side. I froze. And then I smiled. What if we used that? I called Alyssa that night with the dumbest plan I'd ever thought of. I was giggling halfway through explaining it, expecting her to laugh and tell me I was losing it. But instead she leaned in and whispered, "Oh my God, that's brilliant." And just like that we had a plan. We called it Operation Mambo number 5. We created fake accounts, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, even Telegram. I had an old second-hand iPhone and a couple of Androids lying around, plus access to virtual eSIMs through a tech-savvy friend. Burner numbers. New photos. We made sure each girl had her own distinct profile pic, tone and platform. Each one would be based on the song. Monica, Erica, Rita, Tina, Sandra, Mary, Jessica. Each one would text Chris a modified version of their lyric line, something flirty, confusing, just real enough to make him second guess. A drip feed of chaos. We'd space them out, vary the times. We even misspelled a few things on purpose to make them feel authentic. I'd go first, then Alyssa would find the messages and pretend to be devastated again. We wanted to break him, not scream at him. We wanted paranoia. The messages started rolling out one by one. From Instagram, "Hey, it's Monica. I need you in my life again. You've been distant. Why?" From Facebook Messenger, "Erica, here. Still thinking about when you ked me sideways in that hotel room." From WhatsApp, "Rita misses you. You're all I need to be happy, babe. Don't forget that." Each girl had her own tone, her own style. We wanted it to feel like he was spinning plates and they were starting to crash. We waited 3 days before Alyssa found the first message and confronted him. She didn't explode, just looked sad, said she was willing to talk if he was honest. He denied everything, of course, blamed spam, swore she was the only one. But then came Jessica, then Mary, then Tina asking why he didn't show up at the gym anymore. By week 2, Chris was rattled, paranoid. He stopped texting me as much, claimed he was under a lot of stress at work. He was still trying to keep up the charade with me. But you could see it in his eyes. He was unraveling. One night I asked to use his phone to order takeout. He hesitated, froze for a second. I smiled inside. "Something wrong?" I asked, tilting my head. "No, just let me do it." He was sweating. God, it was delicious. Alyssa and I would check in every night like giddy teenage hackers, sharing screenshots, planning the next wave. We even made a shared spreadsheet to track the girls, platforms and message order so we didn't accidentally overlap. We were becoming too good at it. Chris never once suspected it was us. He was so used to being the puppet master, the one with secrets and fake identities, that he couldn't even imagine he was the one being played. By week 3, he was a wreck. He changed phones, blocked numbers, deleted Facebook, told Alyssa he was being stalked by an ex. She offered to help him file a police report. He said he didn't want to make it worse. Classic. By the end of the 4th week, Alyssa had found her own apartment, filed for divorce, quietly transferred funds out of their joint account, consulted a lawyer, packed her things while he was at work with me. And then on a bright, unassuming Saturday morning, we pulled the final string, the grand finale. We both dumped him on the same day. I still remember that Saturday morning like it was burned into my brain. The sun was shining bright through the blinds, but inside me, everything felt dark and cold. That day Chris's world collapsed, and so did mine, in a way I hadn't expected. We had both texted him separately. Alyssa sent him a cold, official-sounding message, the kind you write when you're closing a chapter with no room for argument. She told him the divorce papers were filed, and that she was moving out. Meanwhile, I sent my own message, a brief cutting note saying I couldn't be part of his lies anymore. I told him I deserved better, but I didn't want it to stop there. After all the weeks of watching him squirm, the masks he wore peeling off layer by layer, I wanted to see the real fallout. That morning, I decided to confront him in person at last. I remember standing outside his apartment complex in Brushy Creek, my heart hammering, my hands trembling so badly I had to grip the steering wheel to steady them. I kept thinking, why am I doing this? But it felt like I had to, like I owed it to myself. When he opened the door, he looked like a man caught halfway between shock and disbelief. His carefully constructed facade was crumbling. He tried to speak, but the words sounded hollow, like echoes in an empty room. I'm sorry, he stammered, but sorry wasn't enough. I told him how every word he said had been a lie, how I'd found out from his wife, how he had built this double life right under my nose. I told him about the messages, the fake accounts, and how we had turned his own game against him. The look on his face shifted from guilt to anger to panic. Then Alyssa showed up. She was different in person than over video. She was cold and composed, with this fierce determination that made me realize she was done being the victim. Watching her stand there, I felt a strange kind of kinship. We were no longer just two women he hurt. We were allies, survivors. That day I saw the man I thought I loved for what he really was, a liar, a manipulator, a coward. The days that followed were a storm. Friends started to notice I was distant, distracted. I stopped returning texts, cancelled plans, and spent nights scrolling through old messages, trying to piece together the lies. The betrayal gnawed at me. Sometimes it was this dull ache in my chest, sometimes it was a sharp stab that made me want to scream. My sleep suffered. I kept waking up in cold sweats, heart racing as if I was still in that moment of shock. I would replay conversations in my head, searching for signs, for clues I missed. It was exhausting. Work became a blur. I couldn't focus, and my normally punctual self started arriving late or calling out sick. My boss asked if I was okay, but I just smiled and said I was tired. Who was I kidding? I was broken, but the worst part was the trust. After all that, I didn't know if I could ever trust anyone again. Not myself, not a man, not even the voice in my own head. Sometimes when I was alone I'd imagine what life would have been like if I never met Chris, if I'd stayed single a little longer, if I'd listened to Casey and her warnings, if I'd been stronger. But regret is a poison, and I wasn't about to let it consume me. Instead I started talking to Alyssa more. We became this strange, unexpected team. We shared stories of other women we'd heard about, the others Chris never mentioned. We laughed, we cried, and we planned. I realized something important in those weeks. The hurt didn't have to define me. The betrayal didn't have to be my ending. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to be the one left broken. I was going to fight back.
I wasn't proud of it at first. I mean, revenge isn't something you brag about, right? It's messy, petty, and honestly, a little toxic. But there I was, sitting in my apartment one evening, scrolling through my phone, and feeling that familiar burn of anger, the kind that won't let you sleep, that twists your stomach into knots and won't let go. And then it hit me. If Chris was going to play games, I'd play better ones. That night, I started creating fake profiles. I'm not super tech-savvy, but I knew enough to use virtual numbers through eSIMs, to spoof identities, and to make things look convincing. I spent hours picking photos from stock images, adjusting bios, making sure each persona had their own unique voice. It was ridiculous and hilarious and oddly satisfying. We gave the operation a name, the Mambo Nomo 5 plan.
inspired by that ridiculous 90s Lou Bega song that had popped into my head during the darkest moments of this whole nightmare. The plan was simple: create multiple fake girlfriends for Chris, each communicating on different platforms, so that he'd never see the whole picture, only isolated snippets of chaos. Every message would be a twisted homage to the Mambo No Mo Fi. 5 lyrics, rewritten just enough to feel personal and sharp. Monica would text him on Instagram, "I need you in my life." Erica would message him on Facebook, "Felt so good when you fast *******, ed me sideways." Rita on WhatsApp, "You're all I need to be happy." Tina on Telegram, "I know it's complicated, but I only have eyes for you." Sandra on Snapchat, "Miss seeing you in the gym. Hope you're still keeping up those post-workout sub-sessions." Mary on Messenger, "When you coming for another sleepover?" Jessica would be the sweet one, the confidant. "I'm here if you need to talk." We mixed them up, sent them in odd orders, kept the messages spaced out so he wouldn't catch on. We even included typos and random emojis to keep things casual and believable. Every time he got one, Alyssa and I took turns discovering them. The look of confusion and fear on his face was absolutely priceless. One night, I even accidentally asked to use his phone to order food and subtly checked for new messages. He froze. His eyes darted around like a cornered animal. I felt no sympathy. Not anymore. We became experts at timing and manipulation. We coordinated, laughed at the absurdity of it all, and slowly but surely watched him unravel. The paranoia took over him. He started deleting apps, changing passwords, muttering about being stalked by exes or hacked. He couldn't sleep. He stopped calling me babe so much. The texts slowed down, and the lies became more desperate. Meanwhile, Alyssa quietly took back control of her life. She moved into a new apartment, hired a lawyer, and started the divorce proceedings. She shared bits and pieces with me, strengthening this odd bond between two women who'd been played and hurt by the same man. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about how funny it was, how we'd weaponized a cheesy pop song against the man who thought he was so clever. It felt like poetic justice, but beneath the fun and games, I felt myself changing. The pain was still there, but it wasn't the center of my universe anymore. The rage fueled me, yes, but it also made me stronger. I stopped being the person who blindly trusted. I became the person who fought back. By the end of those weeks, Chris was a mess, a shadow of the man I once thought I loved. And when Alyssa finally filed for divorce, and I ended things for good, I felt lighter. Maybe a little bruised, definitely still wary, but alive. And for the first time in a long time, I believed I could rebuild from this. The weeks after we dumped Chris were strange and quiet in a way I hadn't expected. The storm had passed, but the wreckage was still everywhere. In my thoughts, my daily routines, my sense of self. It wasn't like turning off a light switch and suddenly feeling okay. Healing was slow, uneven, and sometimes it felt like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. I didn't see him again after that final confrontation. Alyssa and I stayed in touch for a while, exchanging updates on the divorce and our lives. She was moving on, slowly but surely, and so was I. There was something cathartic about knowing we'd stood together and taken control in a situation where we'd both felt powerless for so long. I started therapy a couple months later. Sitting in that quiet room, talking through the betrayal, the lies, and the heartbreak, I realized how much it had shaped me. Not just the pain, but the resilience. The part where I refused to be broken. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. Friends noticed the change too. Casey, who'd warned me about Chris in the first place, said I seemed stronger, more grounded, less willing to settle for half-truths. It felt good to hear, even if the road here had been ugly. I also learned to forgive myself for trusting, for ignoring red flags, for not listening to my instincts sooner. Because if there's one thing this whole experience taught me, it's that love doesn't come with guarantees. Sometimes, people are broken in ways you can't fix, and sometimes, you have to walk away before you get hurt even worse. As for Chris, Honestly, I don't think he ever fully understood the consequences of his lies. He lost 2 women who refused to be fooled. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to teach him a lesson. I look back now, almost 3 years later, and I'm proud of the woman I became through all of it. The woman who laughed with Alyssa while plotting petty revenge. The woman who cried on her living room floor but got back up again. The woman who refused to be a footnote in someone else's story. And the irony of it all, using that ridiculous misogynistic 90s song to take down a man who thought he could have it all without consequences. Life's funny like that. Sometimes the soundtrack to your heartbreak turns into the anthem of your comeback.